Driving. A staple of the 21st century human experience. An activity most of us engage on a semi-regular basis to go from point A to point B. Driving is not something most of us think of as anything out of the ordinary. However, in the Balkans, it's anything but ordinary. For those of you that don't know, I recently got a car, and ever since then I've been Ryan Gosling maxing, driving all over these cursed lands, nearly dying 3 times, and almost getting a stomach ulcer from the way BMW drivers drive. As a way to voice my frustration and save some money by not going to a therapist and bitching about my second world problems, I've decided to make a video about the dangers and, well, general situation of driving in the Balkans, so you too, my dear viewer, can be informed if you ever make the fatal mistake of going through here by a car. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Opet kidamo rukama, a sad je jedan cenat ljudi.
The road quality in the Balkans varies more than the mood of a bipolar teenage girl. You can say what you want about Vučić, Orban, or any other wannabe dictator who treats the state as their own bottom bitch. But credit where credit is due. The highways in these countries are absolutely amazing. They're smooth, they're efficient, you got a gas oasis every couple of kilometers, and in no time you get where you need to be. Driving from one end of Hungary to the other, piece of cake. Driving from the tippy top of Serbia all the way down to the bottom, and even to Skopje, North Macedonia, a newborn's baby's ass isn't as smooth as the highway. I mean, the highways are so good, I could almost forgive the stolen elections. All I'm saying is, if Vučić builds a highway from Belgrade to Timisoara, I'll personally go and curb stomp a student protester. However, as soon as you get off the highway, you would think that you were in the Donbass and not in the middle of Transylvania. So, one of the first routes I drove when I first got my car was from Cluj to the Marriage Cemetery, which is located in the north of Romania, right on the Ukrainian border. Now, the Marriage Cemetery, for those of you who don't know, is this cool little place where they basically celebrate death by painting the tombstones of the people that died in a sort of a jolly way, showcasing the way they died, kind of making fun of it, and writing poems about it, basically poking fun of the concept of death and celebrating life. Pretty cool place. If you ever get the chance to visit, definitely do. However, the problem with it is that to get to it, from Cluj to the Marriage Cemetery, you have to drive over 3.5 hours on national roads, which wouldn't be that bad if you didn't have to go up and down a bunch of hills, which have roads that haven't seen maintenance since the days of Ceausescu. Now, there are so many holes on that entire highway that you think that the road was bombed by the Russians. And it wouldn't be an issue if there were like incy-meensy holes, you know, like the typical stuff you find, potholes everywhere. No. These were holes that were almost 1/2 meter deep sometimes. I'm talking about big-ass potholes. Which, you know, I don't really feel indifferent about, considering that I just bought a car and new tires worth over 500 euros with it. So, for most of the route going to the Marriage Cemetery, I was successfully avoiding them. But eventually had to go back to the godforsaken lands of femboys and corporate IT workers known as Cluj. And on the way back, it was pitch black. I'm talking like completely dark. And of course, no one in their sane mind would put in, street lights in the middle of a hill. And I forgot that there was a bunch of holes, so naturally, I just kept going and hit my wheel that the entire car started shaking, and I started panicking, thinking I just got hit by a Russian missile, and I started thinking, you know what? It's over. My obituary is gonna be shown on TV alongside with the Article 5 declaration. I had a good run, I had a great channel, but luckily my car was fine. I had great suspensions. All is well that ends well. But here's the thing, right? This is the case with the roads anywhere in the Balkans that's not in a major city. As soon as you leave the major city, or any city in particular, you're gonna think that you're in a war zone. There's constantly gonna be a bunch of holes, a bunch of shit on the roads that are gonna deck your car, and it's your job to try and minimize the damage, especially considering how little Balkaners earn. Another time I was driving to visit my friend in Hungary, who made the fatal mistake not to be born in Budapest, but in the fallout lands of Alföld. For those of you that don't know, Alföld is flatter than Taylor Swift's ass. And going over there, you'd think that the roads would be fine, considering that flat terrain is perfect for development. You'd fucking think that, but Naughty Foreman has something to say about that. Immediately after getting off the highway in Kecskemét, the road turns into a monstrosity of asphalt patches, layers, and potholes, which turn your drive into a hazardous roller coaster ride. The funniest part about this is that they put the speed limit at 90, but if you even dare to go over 40, the only highway you'll end up driving on is the one to hell. However, the locals who drive some shitbox that's been on the road since the fall of the Berlin Wall will just floor it. Once on that road, while I was fighting for my dear life, in my rearview mirror I saw a little red dot. After 5 seconds, it was halfway on its way to me, and after another 3, I just saw a red Golf 2 bypass me going faster than the speed of sound. I don't even know how or why, but I guess Balkan drivers are just built different. Now, if there's anything more schizophrenic than the roads in the Balkans, then it would be the drivers. The rural ones, how should I put this nicely? Just simply don't give two shits. Speed limit signs to them are just mere suggestions. Driving without a minimum of 1 shot of rakia or palinka inside their system is a cardinal sin, and wearing a seatbelt? Well, that's just globalist propaganda. Literally, when I was buying my car, the seller, to show off what it could do, got into it, refused to buckle up, and then proceeded to floor it in a school zone. You know, of course, the car started beeping because you're not buckled in. And I asked him, like, hey, doesn't the beeping bother you? He said, nah, I just tune it out. To most of the Westerners watching this, it might seem like I'm over-exaggerating a little bit, but to prove my point, I'd like to show you a little clip from the Hungarian news.
Forgalomból kivont autóval kocsikáztak jogosítvány nélkül, ráadásul az egyik keréken még gumi sem volt. Ez tűnt fel a nógrádi rendőröknek, és megállították a kocsit, amiben 2 férfi ült. Ezután a sofőr a rendőrök szeme láttára átmászott a hátsó ülésre, a mellette utazó pedig a kormány mögé ült, hogy mentse a helyzetet. Nem sikerült, kiderült, hogy mindketten részegek voltak.
Luckily, these types of drivers are limited to the national and rural roads, but on the highways we have a completely different breed. Now, for the sake of context, I drive a 2022 Dacia Logan. It's a pretty simple, basic, middle-class car, quite affordable. It has a 1-liter engine, 90 horsepower, but outside of the mechanic, I tell people it's a 1.9 TDI. It's not that powerful, but it gets me where I need to be, and it has no issues driving 130 on the highway. And for the most part, the highway speed limit across Europe and the Balkans is 130. And I like to go that speed limit. If the weather is shit, I'll go 100 to 110. But that's not the case for most Balkan drivers! The highways here, unlike in the States, consist usually of 2 lanes, 1 in each direction. Most sane people will stick to the right lane because that's the right thing to do and only use the left lane to overtake. However, if you drive a Mercedes, a BMW, an Audi, or a newer Skoda model, then you are deathly allergic to the right lane, and your main mode of commuting on the highway is by exclusively flooring it on the left lane until you either reach your destination or die in a fiery car crash and inconvenience every other commuter on the highway, closing the highway for everyone else until the ambulance arrives. The other thing about these drivers is, so when you're driving the highway, as I said, you have 2 lanes, and most of the time in the right lane, you'll have a bunch of trucks. Now, for truck drivers, different rules apply, and they usually have to drive at a max speed of 90. And that's all fine and well, especially because you're driving, well, a 30-ton death machine. But if you're a mere mortal, you don't want to drive 90 because you bought the entire speedometer and you want to use the entire speedometer. So you have to overtake them. So to do just that, you have to go into the cursed left lane. However, as soon as you enter it, in a matter of seconds, you'll have a f***ing white BMW tailgate you and keep flashing you to get out of the way, which wouldn't be an issue if you didn't have a 30-ton semi on your right, which is longer than the schlong of a Congolese villager. And God forbid that the BMW slows down from 170 to 130 until you pass the semi. That would inconvenience him too much because God forbid he goes on the speed limit on the highway. Instead, it's more convenient for them to just keep flashing you and keep tailgating you until you pass the goddamn truck. As you're basically shaking because you have a maniac behind you and a death machine on your right side, stressing even more because he keeps flashing you. And I know what you're gonna say. Yados, you fucking noob, just floor it until you pass the truck and then move on. Here's the thing, right? I drive a fucking Dacia Logan. Even when I floor it, it takes a while to get up to 150. And most of the time, there's a bunch of trucks in the right lane. So there's like a literal convoy. It's not that simple. Balkan drivers as a whole are the worst types of drivers. They're like Minnesotan Asian American women if they were blind, deaf, and born with 2 left arms. The more expensive the car they drive, the higher the chance they'll get away with vehicular manslaughter. They're impatient as so it's not even uncommon to see a retard driving on the train track as a speeding train is coming its way. Trust me, I've seen it. I can't stress enough how much of a nightmare it is to drive in the Balkans. Like after New Year's, I was driving from Belgrade to Ljubljana on the Croatian highway, which is again a great highway. Absolutely loved it. The problem with that is that at the time you had everyone and their Balkan mothers diaspora going back from the Balkan countries to their jobs in Germany and Austria, scrubbing and cleaning toilets, driving their expensive Mercedes and BMWs, having a death wish on the highway. So of course you couldn't pass any of the trucks. It was raining, it was snowing, and they were going 170 on the highway. Alongside with that, I was driving with 3 hours of sleep and a boy cold. A boy cold! All in all, I don't think I've ever been as stressed in my life as I was in that moment. So, I survived that, I can survive anything else. To make things worse, it's not just the expensive cars that'll do this, but the shitboxes too. I can't express how shook I am when I get flashed while overtaking to see an Opel Corsa 2005 or a Volkswagen 2009 Jetta doing this shit. Either way, it's either the most best and expensive cars or the worst, barely standing shitboxes that are doing this type of shit. Now, I know what you might be wondering. Okay, Janos, if it's that bad, then where is the police? I'll tell you where they are. U pičkoj lepoj materini, eto gde su.
Hej policio, hej policio.
Now, in the past couple of God knows how many weeks, I've driven down most of the major highways in the Balkans. And I can count on my right hand the amount of times I've seen a police car. And most of those times, it's been after a pay-toll station where everyone already slows down. Where it matters, they're nowhere to be found. And of course, your typical Balkaners takes full advantage of this shit. And here's the thing, right? I hate the police as much as the next guy. But on the highway, I'd be more than happy to see the police actually doing something for once in their donut-eating lives. Everyone knows that Balkan traffic is bad, but for some reason, there's only 44,000 active duty officers in Serbia, a country with roughly 6 million people, which is already bad. But then you have Romania, which has just slightly less than 20 million people, and they have the same amount of police. Of course, you also have Hungary, who then has less than 10 million people, and they have 36,000. And these numbers encompass all types of cops, and not just the traffic ones. So the ones regulating the roads are even less in number. You would think that ex-socialist, ex-authoritarian countries who used to be police states and promote government jobs would have a much larger number, but hell no. So most of the roads are left unsupervised with maniacs doing whatever the hell they want. And here's the thing, right? I've been driving since I was 15. I got my driving license in the US because over there, if you don't drive or have a car, you're practically a second-class citizen. So it's not like I'm inexperienced or a retard. I mean, maybe the latter, but I'm definitely not inexperienced. And in my 9 years of driving, only a couple of weeks ago did I get my first ever speeding ticket. You can imagine how happy I was over that shit. Extremely. So how it happened was, essentially I was driving on the highway from the north of Serbia to basically Belgrade and going to the nearby cancerous town known as Pančevo. So basically it was highway driving all through and through, and near Belgrade I was taking the exit on the highway. And I did just that. But here's the thing, on the highway the speed limit was 130, and when you're driving on a national road the speed limit is 80 in Serbia and 90 in the rest of the EU, at least in the other Balkan countries. And thinking that I was on a national road, I was driving 90, but no, it wasn't a national road. It was some Belgrade suburb. But the problem was the traffic sign that displayed the speed limit was extremely crooked and you couldn't see it because some drunk driver most likely ran into it and the government can't be f***ed to fix it. So, naturally, me, being the genius of the Carpathians, didn't see that. And I was driving 90 when the speed limit was actually 60. So behind the bush there was a bunch of police and they got my ass with a radar. Realizing I done goofed, I didn't fight it and I just accepted my fate. But although it was my mistake, it was a complete cheese move because not even 300 meters on the ramp, you have maniacs driving 170 and they just go and hide into the bushes, basically waiting for people to up because they don't see a sign. The other thing is, these in Serbia at least, mostly stop you to just get a bribe. Alongside being low in numbers, the police in the Balkans is also severely underfunded. The average cop in Serbia gets an average salary of 624 euros, which, let's be real, is probably skewed to be even higher a little bit because of the cop salaries in Belgrade. So, the average cop that lives in a town of 40,000 people in Serbia most likely earns much less. And considering Europe's appendix, known as the Balkans, have high inflation and high grocery prices, that salary in reality doesn't mean shit. So, to compensate, a lot of cops will turn to corruption and try and indict you for random bullshit just so they can get a bribe out of you so they will leave you alone. For example, I have an uncle in Serbia who frequently does business in Montenegro. Man has his own company, imports shit into Serbia, and every now and then he has to take a business trip to the Adriatic. As such, he is very familiar with the bullshit that occurs on the roads and the paperwork he needs to conduct business as smoothly as possible. One time on his way back from Montenegro, he was stopped by a cop right after the border. The cop was asking for every and any paper under the sun just to annoy him. And of course, him being a top G had every possible paper. Seeing that he's not gonna get my uncle, he pulls the most bullshit card and asks if he paid the residency tax in Montenegro, which is a tax which your hotel usually pays for having guests. Him renting out a private room didn't have that. So, of course, the guy started annoying him over that, only leaving him after he offered him 50 euros to bug off. I'm sure many of you, my Balkan viewers, also have some of your own with the traffic police pulling this kind of bullcrap on you or your family members or friends of friends or whoever, because it's just so common. Now, when it comes to trucks and truck drivers, for the most part, they do not mess around. If anyone on the road knows traffic rules and the code of conduct better than anyone else, then those are truck drivers, because at the end of the day, they are driving a 30-ton death machine, and with just one mistake, they can end up killing themselves and everyone else on the road. So, 99% of truck drivers, at least here in the Balkans, are great drivers, and you should feel safe being around them. However, every now and then, you'll get an empty-headed retard on the road who thinks he can do the same with his truck as he does with his fourth-hand Mercedes. One time, me and my mom were driving across Romania, heading to the seaside of Bulgaria. Because Bulgaria's coast, despite what many will say, is still a hidden gem and has cheap cappuccinos and hookers. So, on the way, most of the road was completely fine. We get to Constanza and then we were heading down the road. Now, on this road, there was a bunch of roundabouts, and in one of them we just entered and were supposed to go straight, first exit. And we were on the outer lane of the roundabout. This truck also entered the roundabout at the same time as us, on the inner lane, and decided in the middle of the roundabout to switch lanes and exit the lane, which ended in him hitting us right in the side of our car and basically pulling us outside of the roundabout. Of course, as you can imagine, the impact left a dent and scared us shitless because a literal truck just hit us. So of course, we tried to flash him, honk him, basically get him to pull over. But he just decided to hit and run. Just kept going. And that was that. More recently, when I was driving when all the Balkan diaspora was coming back home on the border between Slovenia and Croatia, the guards decided to close the border because, you know, to hell with Schengen. Who needs it? Definitely not Romania and Bulgaria. Basically decided to close it for some checks and opened up a couple of lanes to go through. Now, as you can imagine, there was a shit ton of congestion and only a couple lanes were working. And whenever a new lane opened, every Balkaner basically started moving out into that new lane because they would be Balkaners if they didn't care about saving 10 seconds of their lives. So basically, another lane opened for cars. I note, for cars. and me being in another lane start switching. So of course I go extremely slow, around 5 kilometers an hour, look everywhere back and forth, give my signal and everything, only for a huge ass bus to just rush through, barely miss me and my car by the skin of my teeth, and just get in front. The worst part of all, right, was the fact that he was from Kosovo. Yes, I checked his license plates. Like, I get it with cars. If you want to be a retard on the road and want to kill yourself, the only person you're going to end up killing most likely is just yourself. But if you're driving a vehicle with several tons, you're not only gonna kill yourself, but everyone else on that goddamn road. For the love of God and everything holy, just drive passively. Like, I know for a matter of fact, you have a picture of Jesus and a cross hanging up above you. Do you think Jesus would drive like that? I don't think so. I genuinely believe that city driving in the Balkans is one of the upper circles of hell. It's not as bad as driving as, say, in Istanbul, Tbilisi, or God forbid any city in India or Afghanistan, but it's definitely far from enjoyable. How taxi drivers don't go insane because of that is beyond me. But then again, looking at those prices they are offering, maybe they did go insane. For the most part, if you drive in a smaller, non-tourist town in the Balkans, things are pretty chill, and this doesn't apply to them. You go 50, you slow down in a school zone, it's pretty fine. But if you happen to enter a big city, may God have mercy on your soul, because the other drivers won't. I love my walkable cities as much as the Hungarian YouTuber who has a hate boner for Musk and a hard-on for trains. But if you want to get anywhere in the Balkans that's not in the immediate city, say to go for a hike in the mountains, visit some relatives in a nearby city, or hell, travel to another city in a nearby country or on the other end of the continent, then public transportation is your worst enemy, and you absolutely most definitely need a car. And if you're one of those people from r/cars and think I'm full of shit, please go and take a train from Cluj to Bucharest and then come back to me. And if you live anywhere where there's civilization, aka a KFC, then most definitely you'll have trouble with your car. First and foremost, finding parking is absolute hell. The cities in the Balkans, like the rest of Europe, and I guess most of the world, were not designed with cars in mind. Most of them date back to the medieval ages, where people were just pedestrians or had horses. Then in the communist times, they did adjust them a little bit for cars, but considering cars were seen as a luxury, no one accounted for there being so many cars and people utilizing them so much. So of course, the current infrastructure is not made for this amount of traffic. So finding a free parking spot is virtually impossible, as every single street is occupied or designated as a special parking spot, which if you use, you'll pay out of your ass for just to leave your car for a couple of hours. In my city in Cluj, you can pay an annual tax of 300 euros and leave your car out on the street, which would be okay if every spot wasn't already taken. So most of the people who are unlucky have to go and park their car on the outskirts of the city. Like, for example, when I first got my car, I basically had to park it all the way in Manastur, which is a common neighborhood which borders a hill and a forest. So I would do that basically every time I would use it. And to get back to my own common neighborhood of Mraj, I would have to call a cab. And one time when I called my cab, he pulled up to the parking lot and he said, "You left your car here, didn't you, huh?" I said, yeah. But whatever, parking's a bitch anywhere that's not America, right? What really grinds my gears is the driving within the city itself. Now, as I mentioned before, the cities weren't made for basically this amount of traffic. So constantly, the city is congested, along with the fact that the streets are short and there's a bunch of intersections intertwined with. And when you have signs that basically show, oh, where you're supposed to go, they're not placed far enough. So a lot of the time, you're gonna f*** up because some driver's not gonna let you basically switch lanes. So you're gonna have to take a detour because you can't switch lanes because you didn't see it in time. On top of that, a lot of the streets are either narrow or one way. So when there's a traffic jam, that traffic jam is gonna last for a minimum of a couple of hours. So for example, when I was heading from the south of Serbia and heading to New Belgrade, I had to pass through Belgrade's inner city. And I thought it was not gonna be a big deal considering I was there at 2 p.m. But as soon as I got inside, I got hit with a traffic jam with no cars moving whatsoever for about 40 to 50 minutes, with everyone staying in position and everyone just honking as if that was gonna change anything. Like in Cluj, the traffic gets so bad that if you live on the outskirts, basically in the suburbs known as Florești, and if you take the bus, a lot of times when a traffic jam does occur, your bus won't be able to move, so the bus driver will just open up the door so that people can walk out and walk to work, because it'll literally be faster getting there on foot than getting there by bus. The other thing that's really frustrating is, again, that the Mercedeses and BMWs still don't follow the rules even in the cities. Now, because the traffic is so congested, they can't speed. Unless it's at night and there's not a living soul outside, then they'll speed to their heart's content, right? But when there's traffic, they'll still find a different way to annoy you. Now here's the thing about the Balkans and Europe in general. On the streets, you'll more often than not see this little sign, which essentially means no stopping or parking at any time. But because the Mercedes and BMW drivers wash toilets in Germany and earn 2,000 euros for that, they think that rule doesn't apply to them. So, in the narrowest of streets, where you have this sign plastered everywhere, they'll just leave their car wherever they want to go out for a coffee or a cigarette and just not deal with it, because they drive a Mercedes or BMW.
Sve one ružne istetovirane kurvetine sa silikonima kojima je jebač kupio G klasu ili X peticu da ga voze po gradu da se kurče dok idu na nokte pa stanu tako gde god. Vrtići, škole, druže, znači prođi pored njih u 3 popodne, to je jebeno nemoguće, znači svi moraju da parkiraju pod 90 stepeni od škole, tačno ispred ulaza, da bi otišli po svoje jebeno smrdljivo kopile, jer ne daj Bože da jebeni smarač parkira 50 metara niži i prošeta po svoje dete, ne, moraju svi da vide da je on došao po svoje dete, jer Bože moj, volim ja svoje dete, mater ti jebem, svi volimo svoju decu, jebote, John Wayne Gacy je voleo svoju decu, pizdati materine, ti jebem mater. Znači, ne mogu, saobraćaj u ovoj zemlji je meni jako bolna tačka, ja ne znam kako ljudi mogu trezni da voze uopšte u ovom saobraćaju. Ja svaki dan, ja mislim ću kupiti, brate, dash cams, znači kupit ću kamere, stavit ću ih i napred i sa strane i sebi mikrofon i snimat ću, brate, svaki put, bukvalno ću napraviti YouTube kanal od toga, zato što je nepresušno ono, znači, toliko materijala imaš, znači, ja ne mogu ti opišem.
This one time, my friend from Olfurt that I mentioned previously was coming to visit me in Cluj. She drove 6 hours, and being a Hungarian, she for the first time saw terrain that wasn't flat. So, getting to Cluj was pretty stressful for her, to say the least. When she finally arrived, she was dead tired and was trying to get into her hotel's garage. But when she tried to enter, she found a white Mercedes blocking the entrance with the no parking and stopping sign right in front of it. She waited and waited for him to come and move the car, but no one was coming. And considering it was a narrow one-way street, a line of cars formed behind her, honking like there was no tomorrow. So the poor thing somehow maneuvered and was able to enter, but in this little wiggle room, she ended up slightly scratching the Mercedes so lightly she didn't even notice nor feel it. However, the Mercedes' owner, after he was done jerking off in the bushes, came and saw that and came to bitch to the reception desk that someone scratched his precious car where he wasn't supposed to park it. So the weekend that she was there, we had to deal with this stupid ass kukalar who was making a fuss over the scratch, going to the police and all that wonderful stuff. And the entire time he was ranting and raving how the damage is worth several thousands of euros. So, when my friend was leaving, I saw that there was a little bit of paint from the Mercedes on her car. And I decided to just wipe it with my hand. And it came right off like new. And at that moment, if I didn't kill someone, I don't think I ever would. All in all, if you drive a BMW or a Mercedes, I hope you have a horrible day.
Hey, why are you